It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
Welcome to Central Texas. Pete Sousa, the Pete Sousa Show. We are at the Alico building, and we are so happy to be with you. Slovacics, a presenting sponsor. I got a shirt, by the way, yesterday from Ray with my name on it that I'm going to wear. I'm wearing a White Sox jersey today. It's something I don't know that I've worn this in 10 years, but I figured I'd remind White Sox fans while they're in the midst of history for being the worst baseball team of all time. There is some good news to take of it. I thought these uniforms were freaking awesome. Harold Baines, Ron Kittle, Ron Karkovice, Tom Seaver days. You know, I mean, that's pretty. You were
Jack McDowell is who I
Jack
was thinking.
McDowell. Yeah, there you go. But Jack McDowell was after these.
But they did wear him a little bit.
Brought him back. Yes, good point. Yeah, so celebrating the White Sox, reminding White Sox fans that you still got awesome unis and you're still in an awesome city. And of course, Crawford Austin, another presenting sponsor. I want to grab one thing real quick. I got to get these. I want to get the Halloween stuff out. You know, people are always. My mom was always complaining, "Get the Halloween stuff out." There you go. I got the Halloween stuff out because it is fall, and when it's fall, we talk football. But when it is Caitlin Clark, we talk women's basketball. Something quick I wanted to go over. Caitlin Clark, I had this here somewhere. Let me go out of this. Here we go. Hold on one second. Bear with me. Great radio here if you're listening at home. Okay. So Caitlin Clark's playoff debut. This is just released. We're going to get a couple current things out of the way. Then we'll get to Matt Mosley. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Then we go in depth with a open letter to Baylor fans that was written by Robert Griffin, and we'll tell you why he wrote that letter, and we'll talk to Cam Stewart a little bit about it. But Caitlin Clark's playoff debut, we're talking TV ratings right now. It averaged 1.8 million viewers. This was just reported. That is more than any WNBA Finals game last year, and the second most watched WNBA game in 20-plus years. Here's something else to consider. This was during the middle of an NFL Sunday. So eye-opening numbers, and just a soft reminder as we head into, as was mentioned there, football season, that Caitlin Clark still has this amazing pull on America and on the average folks who literally like moms. You know, we used to call it when I worked in TV news, and honestly, this was before, it's kind of funny. This is before Karen was the Karen term, which got started kind of during, I think, COVID. But we used to call Karen. And Karen was the household mom. And really, people are slow to realize or acknowledge, really, and you know this if you had a two-parent household. I was lucky enough to have one. And my mom did work, but she made a lot of the decisions as to what we were buying, what we were doing in our household. It was kind of low key. You know, my dad was always the guy who sort of wielded, the big stick and got the big piece of chicken, right? As Chris Rock says when he came home from work. But my dad ran the household, or so we thought. But mom really ran the household. When you talk about money, she knew what to buy at the supermarket. She knew what we were going to do on weekends. She knew what we were going to have for dinner. All those decisions are money-making decisions. And Karen, right, we'll call her Terry because that's my mom's name because I want to get rid of the Karen terminology. Terry is still running the household, and Terry wants to watch Caitlin Clark. I can promise you, if there was a Caitlin Clark in my mom's orbit, she would have wanted to watch it with us. And by watching it with us, that would have been like a bonding moment, a moment for families to get together. When you talk about Caitlin Clark averaging 1.8 million viewers, more than any finals game last year, WNBA finals, and more than any other WA game in 20-plus years, coming on an NFL Sunday, the old saying, right, the NFL owns the day of the week, to get some real estate on that day is, I said earlier, eye-opening. So kudos to Caitlin Clark and women's basketball. The windfall continues, and Caitlin Clark has been a conduit for folks to get into women's basketball. I worked in NBA public relations for 7 years. I worked with USA Basketball, where I worked with women's basketball teams. And when I worked in the NBA for the Charlotte Hornets, Charlotte Bobcats, then before they were the Hornets again, we worked with the Charlotte Sting. And I can tell you, I had a much better experience doing PR for the women's teams than I did for the men's teams. And I don't know if that's changed. I doubt it has. Just, hey, it was more fun. It was more fun. There was a little bit more of a celebratory atmosphere and a lot of gratitude that you don't see on the men's side, that I didn't see on the men's side. So it's really cool, I think, for Caitlin Clark to have opened this door. And by swinging it open now, we get a look at some of these personalities, they're really cool women. And they have a lot to offer, and there's a lot there to like and to get to know. So the people stories now are coming to the forefront as we continue to move forward in the WNBA postseason. And I'll be so interested to see what happens with some of the numbers with television viewing and streaming and the like. Next topic I wanted to chip away at here and really try to wrap my mind around is the Brett Favre situation. Just moments ago, Brett Favre was in Washington, D.C., and I want to get the details right, so let me call this up. But he's in Washington, D.C., talking to Congress, and he's talking to Congress about brain injuries. And this is all connected now to, it gets really complicated because if you remember, there were funds, TANF funds, temporary assistance for needy family funds, that were allocated towards this group or this company called Provacus. And this Provacus company, $2 million was allocated towards this company because they were supposed to help with concussion drugs. And of course, there's another $77 million that were supposed to be allocated to needy families that were misappropriated. And some folks are alleging it happened on Brett Favre's watch. And really, a lot of folks were overt in hammering Brett Favre, in not getting the full story. And I have no idea what happened. We have rarely heard from Brett Favre about this. But as usual, everyone has been quick to be first to tear Brett Favre down because there are text messages that reveal he did try to funnel some of the funds towards Southern Miss Volleyball and a new facility there, a new arena. That's where his daughter played. There's still it's still not exactly clear. And I'm going from details today from an Associated Press argument. I'm making the argument, or kind of, but an Associated Press article that he didn't know where this money was coming from. Some of that money was also allocated for him to make speaking commitments. And he flat out said today, speaking in Washington, D.C., that he didn't make the speaking engagements, but he didn't know where the money was coming from. This was before a House Ways and Means Committee. So all this stuff is going on. And then speaking to the House Ways and Means Committee, Brett Favre reveals that he has Parkinson's disease. Let's hear it from him today.
Facility at Southern Miss, the one that's gotten all the publicity. I wanted to help my alma mater and benefit the community. Southern Miss introduced me to the nonprofit to see if they could help with the funding. I had no way of knowing that there was anything wrong with how the state funded the project, especially since it was publicly approved by many state agencies and multiple attorneys, including the Attorney General. Sadly, I also lost an investment in a company that I believed was developing a breakthrough concussion drug I thought would help others. And I'm sure you'll understand why it's too late for me, because I've recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's. This is also a cause dear to my heart. Recently, the doctor running the company pleaded guilty to taking TANF money for his own use. I believe that I got swept up in a civil lawsuit at the instigation of State Auditor Shad White.
So there it is. That's Brett Favre pleading his case and making a shocking revelation. in front of the House Ways and Means Committee. Not only he's talking about the trouble he got into with some of those funds, but also talking about just a really tough personal matter that he's going through and dealing with. He was on the Today Show not too long ago, and he's 54 years old right now, by the way, Brett Favre. Super Bowl winning quarterback, went to 2 Super Bowls, inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2016, defied the odds with his career, and we could talk about that in a moment. But when he was on the Today Show, he was asked, how many concussions did you have when you were playing football? And he said, I know of only 3 or 4, but he believes he could have suffered, and this is years ago, 6 years ago to be exact, in 2018, he believes he could have suffered thousands. And anyone that watched Brett Favre play football understands that could really be an accurate number. He talks more about his ears ringing, right? And seeing stars. This is during when he played in the NFL so many times. And he continued to play football. He continued to stay in the game. And I hate to take like a dark tone as we get started with the show, but it's really sad that this is the reality. This is what happens to a lot of these players. At 54 years of age, he's suffering from Parkinson's. Now, there's no direct link right now to his Parkinson's and his play on the football field, but we can only imagine that there is a link there and that there is a direct link. Brett Favre was a hero to a lot of the everyman that watched college football even, and then got a chance to watch him in the NFL. He went to Southern Miss. He played high school football. His father was the coach of his team, and all his dad did was run the football. So there were very little opportunities for Brett to show off his arm. He was recruited by no one. There are stories where he says he could have been recruited by SEC schools, and all this was he was recruited by no one. Southern Miss came in at the last minute and offered him a scholarship. This is all according to reporting by Jeff Pearlman in his book about Brett Favre, Gunslinger. And he ended up at Southern Miss, and he just had that it factor. First of all, he could throw the ball. I mean, it just whistled when he threw it. Nobody could throw harder than Brett Favre. And Brett Favre went hard on and off the field, which is, again, when you talk about some of the situations that he finds himself in today, Brett Favre lived hard, and he didn't always make the best decisions. There was alcoholism, drug abuse that he was very upfront about. He got sober, but not without, and somebody who is sitting here today, sober, hopefully 13 years in November. It's not easy, and part of the process sometimes can be relapse. And Brett Favre tried to get sober a bunch of times, but relapsed before he eventually got it. And as far as we know, Brett Favre is still sober today. And we're not talking about a guy who had to put down, they say like put the plug in the jug, right? With alcoholism. We're talking about painkillers. I mean, nonstop, 24/7. One of the scariest parts of his book, Gunslinger, is when it talks about the best year he had in the NFL was probably the year that he was on painkillers all year long. And to the point where he went to play the night before a playoff game in Detroit, they had to check him into a hospital because he had such sharp pains in his stomach. Well, those sharp pains turned out to be literally, he just had like a rock of waste in his bowels, right? That he could not release because the dehydration, and I guess like the impact, right? You become impacted when you're constantly taking these kind of drugs. I guess because it's from the acetaminophen or the overload of that. Anyways, this guy couldn't even go to the bathroom anymore. And addicts know that can happen. People that become addicted to Oxycontin or Percocets or whatever. But during that season, he had the best year he ever had. And it's because he was playing free, running around the field, throwing the ball all over. And, he was constantly on this merry-go-round with drugs and getting sick and taking more drugs. But, during the games, he was, as they say, 3 wide and winging it and playing so free. you're playing with such confidence, your team's winning. He went on to win a Super Bowl that year. And when you talk about someone with Parkinson's and the possibility of concussions sustained over and over and over again, it's kind of comes together and makes a little bit of sense. Like, here's somebody playing under the influence of kind of like heavy duty drugs all season long. And you're really not feeling it, where a player today who's healthy and isn't under the influence of these pain-killing drugs gets his bell rung or gets his knee hurt, or, now we're talking about these traumatic brain injuries that could lead to Parkinson's disease, or Parkinson's disease being whatever, I'm not a doctor, you get it. But it all kind of makes sense. It's really scary when you look at Brett Favre and his history and, 1,000 concussions, like that's not something that is impossible or an overstatement there. It probably is in the neighborhood of what the real number is. And so it's a real bummer that he has Parkinson's, regardless. And I know that everybody feels this way, regardless of what went on with those funds. What we pulled today out of this meeting and his testifying in front of the House Ways and Means Committee is that Brett Favre has Parkinson's, and that absolutely blows. We'll find out now as we go down the line legally. Maybe we'll uncover more information. Maybe we never will. But he certainly was staunch in his belief or his stance. He knows that he didn't do anything. He didn't know he was doing anything wrong. But it's a guy who pulled his life together, and the book gets into it, right? I mean, there's a lot of wrong there, but I think if you look at my life, right now at 47 years of age, there was a lot of wrong that, I had the opportunity to change and right. So pulling for Brett Favre, but this story, by the way, I did the best I could to talk about the legal aspect of it. And I think that sound we played from Brett Favre was important too, because it was his own voice, but it's very complicated. And it was a bummer to see how many people were so willing to jump right on it and be first and to say that, he's so wrong for all this. But that's the state of affairs as it relates to Brett Favre this afternoon. And I really wanted to share some of that with you guys and my thoughts on it. Coming up, we're going to share the state of the Cowboys. Not so hot right now. Matt Mosley, been on the Cowboys beat for over a decade. He talks to us about the beatdown at home, second week in a row, this time to the Ravens. That's coming up next on the Pete Sousa Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete. Sports.
All right, we are live with Matt Mosley. You can listen to him today, ESPN Central Texas, the Matt Mosley Show, also the Doomsday Podcast, which is a must listen after every Cowboys game. Matt, this is not a lie. I was driving home from Flower Mound this Sunday. After the game, I was listening to some of the Cowboys post game, and then about 2 hours after the game, I started to hit refresh on my Apple Podcast thing because I was dying to hear what you and Ed Werder had to say about this, another not so much of a masterpiece put together by the Cowboys at home.
Well, I appreciate you you wanting to see what we had to say, and they've given us a lot to say, and it's not positive. And on the heels of what I had witnessed with my alma mater, Baylor, on Saturday night, and I mean that we could do a whole nother segment on that, of course, but that was a rough one. At least I'm not as emotionally attached to the Cowboys, and so, but they're in a bad way right now, and then I found it very interesting, Jerry's answer to my question about Derrick Henry, but we can get into that.
Yeah, he said no, right? He said no right away. He said, "Was that someone? Do you regret not signing him?" He said they couldn't afford it.
Yeah, and when you, because of your own approach, but when you've had to sign two players to a combined $95 million a year, no one really wants to hear your sad song about not being able to afford Derrick Henry and what he's making. And he's got a $16 million over 2-year deal, which compared to some of the deals the Cowboys are doing is absolutely nothing. I mean, I just don't think anybody's buying that. And I know a lot of Cowboys fans go, well, Matt, they've got a lot more serious concerns than just a bad running game. Well, yeah, but, we watched that guy shred their defense. And that was a player that was available in free agency. So I would say the zero off season, and then accomplishing basically nothing at defensive tackle and the running back position, it's coming home to roost. And you're seeing that in these first two games. And quite honestly, to Jerry's point, I think Jerry's saying, hey, the running game isn't why we're losing. And I think there's some truth to that. It's like they're so far behind early in football games. The run game is sort of irrelevant because they don't even ever have time to use it. They're already down 21-6 or 28-6, or the Saints game the week before. So it's a really bad situation for them. And now they're trying to spin this thing forward like, hey, it's good that we have a short week and go play at the Giants. I'm just saying, if that's a team they always beat, 12 of the last 13, Dak's 12-0 against them. That. But if they lose that one, it's a dead man walking situation. McCarthy, Zimmer, the whole gang. You can start lining it up. You've seen this movie before. And again, this goes against everything the Cowboys are, though. They are generally a very good regular season team and a horrible postseason team. So they're starting to get their seasons mixed up here.
I got a couple things for you, one on the field and one off the field. First of all, that comeback really meant nothing to me. It's nice to get some momentum going, but you were at the game like you always are. They got kicked in the teeth with the Ravens just running the ball down their throat. And it seems like they're so bad. You mentioned it on the interior defensive line. How bad are they? And is it something that they can rectify?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of, I don't think there's any help on the way. A few years ago when they got off to a really bad start, they traded a first-round pick and brought Amari Cooper in to try to save their season, and he did have a big impact. I don't think there's anybody like that out there along the defensive line, and I mean, they've tried to get this thing done with Linval Joseph, and you got Mozzie, who was your first-round pick, and I think the verdict's still out on him, Mozzie Smith. They've got several, veterans that they're trying to throw in there. They just brought Carlos Watkins back. I mean, it's a real makeshift D-line. And what I don't understand is, like, how did they not know this would be an issue? How do you go to training camp with the group they went to training camp with, and then of course trying to sign people right before the season? It's such a symptom of who the Cowboys are. It's like, let's take care of our superstars, but then let's just completely ignore parts of the team. And right now, the fact that they have people getting blown off the ball, it's a blueprint for every team. And Jerry did not want to hear that about a blueprint. But the truth is, how can you not watch what the Ravens did and what the Saints did and not just line up? How are the Giants, even though, I can't even name the Giants starting running back, how are the Giants not thinking, hey, we've got to line up and we got to run the ball at these guys? Every single team they're going to face. And after this, it does not get easier. A Steelers team that has started 3-0, the 49ers are mixed in there. And of course they're struggling a little bit right now, but of course that's the Cowboys' kryptonite usually. This schedule is not going to get any easier.
The one you talked about the play up front, and I thought it was concerning when you look at the whole team. After the game, Mike McCarthy was asked about CeeDee Lamb, and he mentioned, hey, he quickly took it to preparation. It was kind of like a little bit of smoke there. We need to prepare better, and there's stuff that we have to do off the field to get better. And then Dak said after the game, hey, we need to understand that in the NFL, the work doesn't stop and start at the facility. So there seems like some responsible behavior here off the field, that there's being a light shown on. Do you know anything about that? And is there a movement to get some guys on board and say, hey, we need to be professionals here, and we're not doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty embarrassing, really, to have to talk about that at this level. That, hey, we've had bad practices. We need to be more professional. We need to have more attention to detail. I mean, you had Jordan Lewis was in there yesterday speaking to that, about the attention to detail, the lack of it. And I got to say, Pete, just to kind of take our folks inside that locker room a little bit, I have been talking to players and coaches after losses for years. So I sort of know how it goes, and I know what kind of mood they're going to be in. And I'm really impressed and perplexed with, like, Micah Parsons, because, like, for one, he's very transparent and he's very open and borderline eloquent in sort of talking about all these things. And so on one hand, it's really nice to see a superstar player like that be accountable, because CeeDee Lamb was the opposite. CeeDee Lamb was sneaking out of there without talking to anybody. But you can tell Parsons is just kind of in the wilderness. It's like he was talking about the lack of trust, like that the players behind him, they're not trusting him to do his job. I just think right now, coaches, players, everything, they're wandering around. But I admire Micah's, how forthright he is about it. But I got to tell you, he's lost. He's lost. I mean, like, imagine if, Pete, and you were a good college player, football player, but imagine if you had that kind of physical gifts and you went out back-to-back weeks and it didn't matter. You were blessed to be, like, maybe the greatest pass rusher on the planet right now, and yet through 2 weeks, it doesn't matter, and you're basically an irrelevant player on the field. I think, boy, your pride kicks in. I think this team is embarrassed right now. So that's either a recipe for the Giants getting crushed, and that's what usually happens. I think last year the combined scores were like 87 to 20 something. Not surprised the Giants got 20 something. So I think that my gut tells me the Giants are going to have problems Thursday night. But I think that's based on the past, not really on anything I've seen from this current team.
Is the locker room one that is one of the tougher ones you've seen recently?
What do you mean?
Well, as far as I worded that, I kind of botched it, but like, is there any
No.
dissension there that you've noticed that you hadn't seen in a while? Because last year they didn't lose at home.
Yeah, I think there's some people trying to figure out like who the leaders are. I think Lawrence is. I think Dak is. I think Zimmer has had 2 horrific back-to-back weeks. So his credibility in that locker room is
you
a little
know
bit
how that
down.
goes, Matt. Like those players start to look at each other and say, hey, does this guy even know what he's doing?
Correct. Yeah. And so far they haven't turned on him, but the one, so it's like, I don't think there's dissension. I think it's more, there's confusion. And Mike is trying to be a leader, but I don't think he knows exactly what to do right now, because like he's saying a bunch of stuff, but the only thing that they were on the same page about in what I heard them say, and they said it again yesterday, was that there's too much hero ball. I heard D-Law say that. I heard Lewis say that, and I heard Micah talking about everybody trying to be Superman. And he's the most like a Superman, and yet he's the one kind of saying that, hey, everybody's trying to play hero ball out there. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I just know, one of those plays, Aguilar, who you're familiar with from all your Eagles ties, is, they didn't bring him to the ground. It was just as simple as a missed tackle, and like 55 yards later, he's nearly scoring. Okay, I mean, you're probably shocked to see him catch the ball, but he did, and then he slipped away and made his way down the sideline. So I need even my local high school team. I need to see a win from somebody this week. I mean, I just anybody. And the Bears, of course, have the Mormons coming in. Always worries me when you're around because the Mormons have tried to adopt you, and I feel like they've come very close. So that'll be interesting with BYU coming into town here.
I have a theory, by the way, about that game, the Baylor Colorado game, and that Hail Mary, Matt, and of course the Richardson fumble. I feel like that was like a sliding doors moment where if you win that game, you just beat Colorado on a national stage. It felt like the whole world was watching. You probably get that Fox Noon kickoff show at home this weekend where you take on undefeated BYU, and you have another chance, right, to impress recruits in the rest of the country at home and go to 4 wins on the season. But instead, now you're 11 a.m. on FS1, and it's like, all right, now we got to get some life into this. I just felt like that Colorado loss was a real missed opportunity for the entire program and ultimately school.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think there are certain personalities and sometimes head coaches who are just sort of doomed. And it feels like that with Dave Aranda right now. And Dave does not help himself because Dave has no relationship with anybody in the media. There's really no one to defend him because no one even knows. I'm telling you, Pete, I've dealt with coaches for going on like 25 years now at all levels. And I've never dealt, and I've dealt with Parcells on a weekly basis. Okay. The biggest, huge personality, incredible guy to deal with, both good and bad. But I've never dealt with somebody who had such a little regard for the media, and not even like dislike or he's rude, just like he doesn't care. And so unlike Rule and Briles and others who people in the media sort of knew him like nobody knows, like nobody's going to rush to Dave Aranda's defense because he spent so little time cultivating relationships. And so, again, he needs to get back to being a defensive coordinator where he's more comfortable, because his comfort level in doing head coach type things and representing a university it's bad. And again, what happened the other night, I don't know, maybe great things would have happened if they'd won that game. I don't know. But right now he is a doomed figure. And I would say, if you asked me, and you didn't, but I'll provide this anyway. If you say, well, Mosley, what percentage chance is it that Dave Aranda's the head coach next season as they sit here 2-2? I would say it's 80% that he's not. And again, that's a hard thing to come back from what happened the other night. I hope they do. I really hope they do. But I'm just saying, Dave Aranda is a man in the wilderness with not, and there's just not a lot of people who are going to rush to his defense.
Matt Mosley, ESPN Central Texas, Rogue Media Network. That's invaluable insight, man. I really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate the information.
I appreciate your friendship, and it's great to be with you. And I just I love doing it with you guys. So
by the way, Mosley, so I'm in here, and we were on such good, like, serious stuff. I didn't want to break it. Mike Hamilton from Rogue Media, Mosey's on in to the studio, takes his shoe off, then he takes his sock off, and then he starts going to work on his feet. I mean, you're just be happy that you do those doomsday pods from AT&T. All right, pal?
Yeah,
up there in the luxury box.
There's a reason I do everything on remote, and Mike and I are able to have a really nice friendship and a rapport because we are in separate places. But if that happened, I would end the show and I would walk out of the studio if I saw any of that going on. It would not last.
Oh, I'm going to check you out at Brazos Landing tomorrow. I can't wait. Remote show.
Oh, man, they make a good bang bang shrimp over there. Come see us.
I'm coming out. All right, Matt. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, that's Matt Mosley and the Pete Sousa, powered by Rogue Media. The Pete Sousa Show rolls on after this.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
To welcome Cam Stewart back into the casa, mi casa, su casa, Cam. Let me move over here so I can see you. How did we do it with me and you? Where were you seated? Oh, you're just so small. Right?
Was that what you wanted to bring up?
When I'm over? No.
The fact that I'm vertically challenged.
So yesterday,
I'm average height.
I was over in the Aldi shopping center when Mike sent out a text message that Aldi was crazy, and I was trying to find his car so I could put like a threatening note on it, like if you park this way again, I'm going to shoot you. But he was
Look
gone.
for the license plate.
He was gone.
Don't say it, but you know what it is.
Yeah. Go Spurs, go.
Va Spurs, va.
So but anyways, at that moment in time, KWTX News 10, the leading source of news in our market here in Central Texas, I got an alert, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, an alert, and it's football related. And it said, Robert Griffin puts his full support behind Dave Aranda. Okay. I want to read this, and then I want to get reaction from you, Cam.
Yep.
Okay.
This is Locked On Baylor tomorrow, by the way.
RG3 posted this on X.
Yep.
I'm a fan of Dave Aranda, the coach, and how unique he is. I'm a fan of Dave Aranda, the man. He has been great to my family and has been a phenomenal developer of men at Baylor. The only people who can turn this season into a success are the players in that locker room. The only ones who can get the fans to buy back in are the players in the locker room. It won't be easy, but God gives his toughest battles to his strongest warriors. Then he goes on to say, Coach Aranda is not worth giving up on. Coach Aranda is brilliant and a leader of men. Now we go all caps, right? Hit it. All caps. Dave Aranda has my full support. And I think that was the end of it. So obviously, this comes on the heels of a loss that brings Baylor to, what are they, 2-2 now?
Yep.
Let me give my reaction first. I was like, I didn't know he was getting fired tomorrow. So I thought it was a little extreme. You just lost a heartbreaker. And I didn't know RG3 was on the message boards like that either. But
I guess.
What were your thoughts about that? My instant reaction was, I don't think this was necessary. Nice of RG3. I don't think it was necessary at all.
Kind of the same thing in that, I'm in a weird spot with this in terms of how it relates to the coach, because we have thought so much about what it would take to fire Dave Aranda the last year or so. All right. The ins and outs and the positives and negatives of him staying, we've thought through like every scenario. So to me, I didn't even have the thought of, that gut wrenching loss that I too put on the coaching staff to a big degree. And falling to 2-2 as to be like, that's it. That's the final straw. It's like, well, they didn't fire him after they lost to Texas State last year. They didn't fire him after they went 3-9 last year.
Yeah.
What makes you think they're going to fire him after being
there's no real world where he gets fired before the season's over, unless
not a Baylor anyway.
No. Yeah, that's what I mean.
And if he was 1-4 after next week, that would be a different story. Maybe then you're in disaster mode. But 2-2 after a 3-9 season, for most programs, that's a stride. That is a step in the right direction. So I did think it was kind of unnecessary for RG3 to come out and say that. But then I get roped in because he talks about it the same way everyone else talks about it, in the same way I had to preface it for so long, and the way I'm trying to stop prefacing this. We know he's a good guy. We know he's a nice guy and probably a good leader for these guys, for the guys in the locker room. I don't doubt that, he hasn't created a good atmosphere and things, but when push comes to shove, we got to win football games here. And more so than most schools, Baylor needs to win football games. That's what raises the profile of the university. They don't have, this big public school endowment and pedigree. And you still knew what the University of Nebraska was even after they sucked in football, right? You'd have trouble getting kids from out of state to go there, because who wants to go there when they're not good at football? Like, that raises a profile of a school. And Baylor, what we've realized in the last 15 years, can be competitive in football. They aren't, the way OU would be at the top of the conference, picked to be there every single year, but they won back-to-back conference championships. They were 11-1 both those years. They had a Heisman Trophy winner a few years before who was in support of the head coach. They built a beautiful new football stadium. And from the time that I started at Baylor 9 years ago, where it was almost 70% Texas versus out of state, it is nearly 50-50 now for a small private Baptist school in Waco, Texas. That's football. Football does that. So as much as we love Dave Aranda and how quirky he can be and how nice he is with the families, you got to win football games. And that's the tunnel vision now.
So
and I'm not saying fire him right now.
No, I know you're not.
But I'm saying that stuff isn't going to matter soon. We talked about Guy Morris passed away last year.
Yeah.
He was the Baylor coach before Art Briles. And some great stories came out of that about what a nice guy he was, good family man, good for the front-facing part of the program. But we also remember him as the coach before Art Briles because they didn't win.
Yeah.
And that's the footnote that Dave Aranda could become if he doesn't start winning here soon. So I obviously respect that he is a good guy. He's not a scumbag. He is not leading the program into scandal, which that's a problem with a lot of other schools. And, you look at Bobby Petrino going back as the OC to Arkansas and Hugh Freeze being the head coach at Auburn. Like, we're not dealing with something like that, but we're also not winning football games. It's kind of the thing sorry to go so long with this, but it's kind of where I was getting at with last week when talking about the culture between Colorado and Baylor. And all the Colorado fans just took it as, oh, here's this nerd who doesn't know anything, who's just shitting on Colorado's culture. And after Colorado wins, they're like, oh, it must have been the culture. And I wasn't even necessarily saying it was a bad culture. It's not one I like as someone from the outside. But my point was, you've got two very different cultures. Right? Deion Sanders and Dave Aranda, you cannot find two more different coaches going against each other in a Division I game.
And that Colorado culture is a ghost. That's going to be gone as soon as Deion's gone.
Right.
Baylor's culture it's the university.
And the point of that was to say, here's two very different cultures, and neither one of them are winning football games at the clip they need to be. So that was kind of the whole point. It's like, it almost doesn't matter what it's like if you're not winning. And when you are winning, then, you need to make sure it's going the right way. I can say that from someone who, having been through this as a Baylor fan and a Baylor student at the time, like, you don't want that to be the trade-off. But I think there's a way that Baylor can win and have a nice culture the way that TCU did for so long under Gary Patterson, that it's like, why are we settling for one or the other?
So what do you think it takes? Like, and I ask you this question because you're dialed in with the fan base, and I want to know what you think about how does the fan base feel? Doing Locked On Baylor, you get so much reaction. What's it going to take for Dave Aranda to be deemed a success this year? Is a bowl game enough?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. At least for the athletic department, if nothing else.
Yeah.
There will be some fans who don't think that's enough, but I think the majority would say we're back in a bowl game. We've got a really good recruiting class coming in next year. We had some young guys make strides, because that's the thing is, people would say, well, we need to see improvement. And if you're going to a bowl game, a 3-win improvement is a heck of an improvement. And you've got a bunch of guys in key positions who are coming back next year. So yeah, I think a bowl game would be enough.
No bowl game? It's the end for him. We've got to make a move. Yeah, and
I thought it was last year. To be totally honest, I thought he was done last year.
And I think Dave Aranda would tell you he needs to. He needs to go. I think he knows he's a logical guy. He's a winner, and I think he knows if they don't make a bowl game, he doesn't deserve to remain the head coach at a school like Baylor. Mack Rhodes is an athletic director with his hires. I think he has been very good. The Kim Mulkey situation was going to come to a head regardless of who was in charge. That's my take on the whole thing. I love Kim Mulkey because she's fire and brimstone, and you get what you get, but at the same time, it was enough already from anybody you talk to inside.
Oh yeah.
How do you like what he has done in his hires as an athletic director? Big hires.
I think overall it's been good. I think it's better than a lot of people give him credit for, because he's getting a lot of heat the last year.
Yeah.
And I like Mac because I've kind of seen him a little bit behind the scenes and heard from people, and I'm sure you know this too. He's a fiery guy.
Yeah.
Like he can get fired up in a good way. Like he's into this. You know what I mean? It's not a job for him. Like he's almost a coach who has become an AD, so to speak. And so he's way into football and basketball specifically. And so I like that. I don't like having an alien up there like his predecessor. But I will say, if you're comparing resumes, Ian McCaw's was better at Baylor than Mac Rhodes.
I introduced myself to Ian McCaw at a Liberty Bowl game, and it was like
weird guy,
empty seat.
Yeah, weird guy.
That's how I felt.
And look, that we also got to take into account what happened in the athletic department under Ian McCaw's reign. So it's not.
I mentioned
I'm not saying
friend.
He's a better one, but like in terms of the hires,
I mentioned our mutual friend and like where I knew that mutual friend from and where I live. So maybe there's something there. But my limited interaction, which you can't judge somebody on, I was like, oh, that I walked away thinking that didn't go great. You know,
former UMass guy, Northeastern guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was the AD at both.
No way.
Yeah.
Is he a Northeast guy?
I think so. Yeah, he was definitely. If you've heard him, he's not like a down home Southern guy for sure. I think he might even be Canadian.
Oh, really?
This is
I'm
Canadian
sure
American.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's Canadian. Okay.
And was the AD at Northeastern for 6 years, and then UMass, and from UMass to Baylor. Huh. How about that? They won.
Was he a hockey guy?
I mean, he might be. Yeah. But
back to Mac Rhodes.
He worked in the front office. So he's born in Canada, graduated from a Canadian university, and then worked for the Hartford Whalers. So yeah.
Oh wow.
But
now
Mac Rhodes.
Now he's got me.
So you're a big hockey guy, I know.
But the Hartford Whalers, I always like any team with an awesome logo like that in an area of the country that I think is underrated that just gets
fuck Connecticut. Dude.
Oh, Hartford is.
My God,
I've talked about this. I've talked about this on the show. Hartford, the media, and I looked it up. I have to make a correction. Their DMA is like they're like 30 or 28.
Yeah. You get a lot of people. You got a lot of commuters living there. Anyway. They couldn't survive in the NHL. Mac Rhodes. Yeah. The Kim Mulkey situation, untenable, I thought.
Yeah.
I thought there was.
What did you hear from the inside about that?
Probably the same things you've heard, and that it was just not going to go on any longer. Like she was so butthurt after the men's team won a national championship and felt there was so much more attention to that. And like, it's a bigger deal nationally. It's a bigger deal. And
what
she was she just made some like big time demands financially and some for posterity that did not get approved. And I think what's interesting about that though is had that happened like this past year, would Baylor have ponied up the way women's basketball is looked at differently this year versus 3 years ago?
I don't think so, because I think that
she was difficult.
I think that was again, she had become so divisive in that athletic department that it was okay. This is a great reason to, and you know, people got that story wrong. You and I know it. I mean,
which part of it?
Just the fact that like publicly it was like, oh, I can't believe Baylor, or I can't believe she wanted to leave Baylor. Like, no. She would have stayed. They were like,
well, sure,
by all means, like, please, like, go.
It's almost like
else.
Go test the market.
Yeah,
and she did, and she got it.
Yeah, but they didn't want her back. I mean, they didn't want her back, and she felt pissed off.
It was like the door's not locked. Let's say that.
And she was very. I mean, she still. I can say from solid sources that like she still resents the school and the university. I mean, that was horseshit a couple years ago. Whatever. When they went to the Final Four at LSU and there was a billboard in Waco.
Yeah, that's kind of bush.
I you know, and again, I would play for Kim Mulkey. I love her fiery spirit, and as a coach, she's a badass. But like, I think if I spent 365 days with her, I think it would be rough. I do. I just feel like that's and all those kind of coaches. That's like a Bill Parcells. Like he can't last anywhere for so long because he'll just, you know, it's so difficult. Bobby Knight was a miracle lasting at Indiana for as long as he did, but that's because he ruled. He was the czar.
And Kim was here 20 years.
Yeah.
And by the way, Mac replaces her with a coach who's won 70% of her games.
Yeah.
So it's not a dynasty, but most hirings, that's all you can ask for. Winning games.
And if I go to call a game in Houston and I tell Kelvin Sampson where I live, first thing he says, Mac Rhodes gave me the job here. He is so grateful to Matt
That's
Rhodes.
another thing, by the way, is he uplifted that athletic.
That was a
big time.
disaster.
Yeah.
They have basically what's a brand new arena on the old one. They are cooking there. It's a shame they haven't been able to make the next step. But
And he was there with some good football teams too, with Sumlin.
Yeah.
Mac was the guy. So
Kevin Sumlin.
Yeah. So Case Keenum.
Yeah.
So I think Mac is better than I think some Baylor fans are giving him credit for right now. And I always say, like, this decision to hold on to Aranda might come back to bite him and be one that we can use against him. But the decision to hire Aranda, hindsight is 2020. I always say this with like Patino and the Celtics. At the time, that was a hell of a hire.
Yeah.
If you're Baylor, after 3 years after major scandal, rocks your team, and then a guy finally brings you up and then bolts to the NFL. All you did was go out and get the defensive coordinator for the team that just won the national championship. That's going to have 10 guys picked in the first round. Like that's a pretty bang on job. A guy who's led top 5 defenses
and also
times.
a guy that fits the mold. He was a perfect fit. Do you think that was there even a decision, if it was hard or not, I don't know, for Joey Maguire? Like, was there, how close did that come? What have you heard about that?
I don't have a great knowledge on this. That's why I haven't really done shows on it, but I heard it did not get that far. Because you got to remember too, Joey was a positional coach, and more of a recruiter, and he had not been a coordinator or a head coach in college. And as bad as the players wanted him, his head coaching experience was in high school, very successful, but it was in 5A high school. So I heard that it got some consideration, but nothing really serious, and that they had some names that they were looking at because they knew, Matt Rule had interviewed for jobs the year before, NFL jobs the year before. And so I think there was some writing on the wall in terms of he's going to take some interviews this winter. So that's why I think it didn't really take off the ground, but the players really wanted it on Twitter anyway. And with what's going on at Tech now, there's no longer that discussion of, did they hire the wrong guy? I mean, they're both having their struggles right now.
Yeah.
I think it would have been like,
Tech's
overall
coming out of it, Cam. They're 3-1.
Yeah, they are.
I
totally forgot they won that first game.
Yeah. No, because it felt like they lost.
They lost.
Yeah.
And then they got killed up in Pullman. Like, as a Baylor fan at the time, I don't think we would have minded having Joey Maguire. And you see what he does for a brand. And I think you owe a lot of what Matt Rule was able to do and bring this program back to Joey Maguire as well.
In 2019, when I started to do some sports stuff at KWTX, they were like, hey, we're going to make you part of the pregame show that KWTX did for Baylor football. You're going to talk to Matt Rule before every game. And we'll probably tape something at the practice facility on like Thursday. Awesome. And then it got word, Matt Rule's not going to do it anymore. You're going to talk to Joey Maguire. Okay, great. I mean, the guy just has the it factor. Now, I have no clue what he was like, X's and O's. So, like, I think
we're still trying to figure that out too.
Yeah. But he was like overwhelming. Like, man, this guy could run for office. He's that kind of guy. Like he's just, and he's
gets a great guy to have around your program.
Yeah, he gets it. He gets the media aspect. He, even getting ready for the Big 12 show I'm doing tomorrow. I watched his press conference, and like, the first thing he does when he comes out is thanks the fans for being in such, I know it got hot, all this stuff. So it was cool. All right, one more thing before
can I add one thing to that? Because imagine what this tenure would be like for Dave Aranda if Joey Maguire had stuck around, not gotten a head coaching job. For as much as Aranda has with the media, and he doesn't want to talk to them, and he's not talking to them, and how it's tough to get behind that shell. Could you imagine if he had basically a spokesperson like Joey Maguire around,
and
what that would do for
to defer?
Yeah, and I mean, how loud would the discussions even have been last year to fire Aranda? If you've got a guy in Joey Maguire who you trust is telling you the good things about it every week at 3-9, instead of a guy saying, yeah, I thought we practiced really good. I don't know what happened. It becomes a different story, and it becomes a totally different look at the tenure, I think. But obviously that wasn't going to happen. Joey was going to get a job somewhere, whether it was coordinating or something like that, being a head coach, apparently.
All right, so we're following the show Monsters. Zach, have you watched?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Zach has not watched. Monsters on Netflix. It's about the Menendez brothers. And this is just I need your take on this.
Yep.
You got to get creative here. If the Lyle Menendez character was an athlete, who is he?
Wait a minute. In terms of like what he looks like, or
no. What kind of like type of player? Like who? Like. I texted you last night and called him 3 Mile Lyle because this guy is going for it in every scene.
Yeah.
He's bombastic. He very rarely does he speak in any kind of tone that you would carry in a normal conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes it tough for me. Like, who is that? Honestly, the first one that came to mind that wasn't a soccer player was Garnett.
Kevin Garnett. Whoa, so you're just giving Lyle the ball now.
So here's why I didn't want to say it. So I do that because of the intensity.
Okay.
Like Garnett was freaking hell-bent when the whistle blew. Like he was the most intense dude.
Nicholas Chavez, by the way, is who plays Lyle. And
Lyle, though, is supposed to be made out to be kind of a doofus who's also very intense. Like he keeps talking about this wings place he wants to open up, and they're clearly like foreshadowing that to be a bad business idea. And like he's coked out and he loves Milli Vanilli, and like so Garnett is like a Hall of Famer, top 50 player ever to play the game. Like so Lyle wouldn't be like that, but I can't think of someone who's like super intense like that, but you're like laughing at them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking when I think of Lyle Menendez. And
I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe like a Pete Rose, but Pete Rose is great.
The other one I thought of was like Mahomes when he yells sounds funny because of his voice, but like he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever to play. So this is a tough one for me, Pete. I'm trying to think if I could think of a better one.
I mean, he could. You know what he could be? This is no shade on my man. Maybe like a Ryan Leaf. Someone who's very outspoken. Went over.
Sure, that's a better example. Needs to learn a lesson. Like thinks he can get away with stuff. Lyle Menendez thought he was just going to get away with killing his parents.
Yeah, it might not be
not answering the investigators.
And Ryan Leaf now I think would laugh at that.
Yeah, right. Obviously, and by the way, we wish that would be something that could happen to Lyle Menendez.
They must love Ryan Leaf. Because and by the way, a payoff alum.
Yes.
But he no longer doing games for ESPN, and then he was on a huge game this weekend for Fox or some on network.
Fox, Daddy Fox.
Maybe FS1, but I was like, dude, this guy, he's so good. He's become one of those guys who you always think, okay, how can I keep my job? Well, become uniquely qualified, become indispensable. He's very good as an analyst. And you said,
so I just got to go to prison,
huh?
And I'll be uniquely qualified.
And you said yesterday that there aren't that many great analysts.
That's true. Yeah. Did we say that on the air?
No, but we said
we did. Yeah, you've taking from when you take the coaches and the players, you take the 1% of football people that really, really know their shit and have been in those rooms, and still only a small fraction of that 1% can put it across to an audience.
Yeah.
And that's so rare. And some will just be like Mark Helfrich. So
you're one of the 1%. All right, Cam Stewart, you got to coach a show. We'll let you go. You guys got to go. We got to go. Thank you very much to Slovacics and Crawford Austin Properties. The Pete Sousa Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network, rolls on tomorrow, Wednesday.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
We are Rogue Media Sports.